like messaging and like team communication and stuff?
What do you mean, other than email?
Well, email, but like, are you guys on Microsoft Teams? Are you guys on Slack? Are you guys on what kind of stuff?
So it's a little bit of an interesting one. So Carbon obviously has a chat functionality, so that does incorporate a lot of our communication there, right?
Okay.
So using timelines, chatting on emails, giving instructions, assigning to timelines. A lot of our communication does take place in Carbon. And then it sort of varies between the portions, right? So I'll have voice calls with team members. I'll either do that with my US team on just a regular old iPhone. With my South African team, we use Skype.
Oh, interesting.
And that's just for voice calls. Or if they need to get hold of me quickly and ask me a question, my Skype's open, they can just chat through me. And that's normally like, hey, I need a code to get in. Can you help me?
Oh, got it.
That type of, I had to reset my cache, so it's not remembering my computer type situation. For any of our team calls, so where there's more than 3 of us on a phone call, we'll go to Zoom, and we use that for our video calls. We also use WhatsApp in South Africa. Texting is not cheap in South Africa as it is in the US. So it's a little bit more expensive. So people, and this is the rest of the world, really, not just South Africa. People use WhatsApp to communicate. It's a really secure method to do it. It's actually one of the most secure methods out there. And they've got groups, so they can be mass communication sent out to the team if something changes, a team meeting, and then individually they can talk with each other that way as well.
Interesting. When you go through the buying decision of like implementing those types of technologies for communication, like, have you thought about bringing it all into just one communication platform? And if so, what goes into a decision like that? Or if not, what goes into a decision like that?
Yeah, we've thought about it a few times, especially when we went over to Microsoft 365, and then obviously Teams comes with it, right? Just haven't gone to Teams at this point, basically. Some people just have issues with it on computer. Sometimes I have issues with it on my computer. It's one of those situations at this point where like the system's not broken, so we're not going to fix it. It's working, so we're just going to keep running forward with the decisions we've made. We tried like Slack out for a while, and I just found it to just be a very lazy means of communication. So
I can see that.
Yeah, I've got one client who's on it, and I get some requests, and I literally I'll screenshot the request and put it into an email, because I'm like, this should not be a question we're asking in Slack, because we actually need an audit trail of this. And I know there's audit trail in Slack, but I'm never going to respond to you with the 7 files and 400 questions you have for me in Slack. So why are we putting this question in Slack?
So I'm glad you brought that up, because I think what you're referring to is like what I call like Slack 1.0, or essentially what it is it's the experience that many people have when they first come into Slack, which is like, well, this is kind of like Teams, only a lot more scatterbrained. Because like, if we're being honest with you, like that's one thing I don't care much for about Slack, because I had actually started off on Teams, and then when I started my own business, I did Slack. Just because, like, realistically, software developers, 9 out of 10 of them are going to be on Slack. So I'm like, all right, I want to be where you guys are. And what I've come to really appreciate about Slack is, you even take your example of like, client messages you on Slack. Well, I'm just going to screenshot that and put it over to email. The really, really cool thing, or the powerful thing is when you start building integrations between Slack and your various platforms. So, for example, one of my clients gave me personally an email for them, but not my other accountant. And so she didn't have any visibility to the emails that were coming into that inbox. So what I did is I was able to set up a channel for just her and I, where every time there was an email that came into that inbox, it would be forwarded to the Slack channel. And then another instance is we're using ClickUp project management. So every time my accountant finishes her tasks, we'll get a notification on that Slack channel, say, hey, this thing has been done, which can be really helpful for like, especially when we're at month end and I'm like, oh, can I refresh this report so that I can get it to our client, rather than her having to come and tell me that. Once she clicks, done, it'll just automatically send a notification over. So that's where I found a lot of strength in communicating over Slack. No,
there's definitely some benefits. But again, things aren't broken. Why fix them? And that's sort of the way we're run forward right now. Though I do consistently relook at teams and know that there probably is a little bit of efficiency if we move there, but it would require some training. So it's sort of
Change
is the
management.
efficiencies that we'll save worth the training time we'll have to invest?
Well, it's the training time, but it's also the change management overall, right? Like people
Mhm.
are going to typically people will continue in a perpetual motion until acted upon by a greater equal or greater force or whatever,
Yeah.
right? And so the change management can be a lift, especially when you've got 39 employees.
Yep.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's just different.
that's true. That is very true. I think my experience, again, I coming into the pandemic, Teams was like the very first thing our company had adopted, and I was like a Teams evangelist, so I have like a little bit of a sway on this, but
Yeah.
I'm actually a huge fan of it. I know people poop on it all the time, but I'm like, I think it's great. I think they've thought a lot about the how to like structure things in there, like even the whole thing about like you've got a dedicated team for each of these different things, and I feel like there's just better organization and structure to it. I'm a huge fan of that type of integration. But
Yeah. I mean, the only problem that we would have with teams, right, is we want people to work in common. And if they're in
that's
teams,
true.
their outlook's right there.
That's
And it's
true.
easy to default to the wrong place.
You're right. You're right. When you got that operations platform, yeah, that can be really tricky.
Yeah. So that's I probably, as I'm sitting here thinking about it is probably one of the main reasons why I'm sort of hesitant to make the change.
And that right there, I think makes a ton of sense. And I think this is this does round out probably our whole conversation about what tech to choose. Is what people don't realize is you're never making a tech decision in your business in a microcosm, right? It's never just this one isolated, like on the merits of this platform alone, I'm going to choose it. It's always whether it's talking about QuickBooks and thinking about how it's integrated with everything else, or it's talking about, hey, if we choose Teams, people are probably not going to use Carbon. Like you're always making decisions in a way that considers what other pieces of your tech are going to be coexisting and coinciding with the process. And that's honestly, that's probably where it makes it so hard for every single accountant to use the exact same tech platform.
Yeah. It's definitely a situation where we've made the decision that operationally, Carbon is our number one. From a client-facing side, QuickBooks is our number one choice. Now we make other decisions around those two pieces of software.
That's smart. Yeah. And I like that approach though, too. You choose where your priority is, and then you make your, subsequent tech decisions off of that. That's really smart.
Well, I get it right every now and then.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that. Well, Zane, any other things that would be good for us to talk about as it relates to tech stack?
I think we've got them all. We've reached the point where it's like, it took us a long time to get there, but the crux of it is, find something that works for you and go with it.
That's good. Or as every accountant says, it depends.
Exactly.